On today's hike, we're looking for the Douglas Fir Tree. Douglas Fir Tree is a fantastic tree, has a fantastic history. Hopefully we can find it, go through a few notes on the tree, and if you like it, I can continue to do videos like this in the future. Now, hopefully it doesn't rain today. Coco spotted something, so it's time to go. What have you spotted? What are you barking at? Well, here we found a very young Douglas fir. We look at the needles. Now it's like a fir, but it's not actually a true fir, the Douglas fir. And the way the needles just come to these stems, and they come out either side. And here are the unique cones that it has. And these needles, especially when young, can be used to make teas. They're high in vitamin C, high in antioxidants, the essential oils, fantastic for digestion. This is fantastic for, well, people on voyages, because these type of leaves, being high in vitamin C, are good at stopping people that don't have access to much vitamin C getting scurvy. So they're not native from this country. We have needles that go up to about 4 centimeters long. It's seen as one of the harder softwoods, which is why it's loved by carpenters and whatnot. So it tends to have, or it does have, female and male cones that are born onto the same tree. They grow in different parts of the tree, and they hang downwards. See how they're on the bottom? And they tend to, as they grow, they hang further down, just like a spruce. Whereas a true fir, the cones are on the top. They grow upwards. The older it gets, the thicker and more corkier the bark gets. And it has those deep furrows in it, as we see here. The smell is amazing. Where you get the resin in it, causes a nice turpentine type smell. Absolutely love these trees, like the creaking noise that they make around you. So the inner bark on them can be used like a sort of chewing gum. And the resin that you get out of it can be used medicinally, can be used like an antiseptic in wounds. It's just a fantastic tree. Look how tall it is. The tallest trees, it will be the tallest trees in this forest, unless we find some sequoias in this forest. Oh my gosh. Well, we found my drone after the wind took it away. He's still alive. But we may refrain from filming the tops of these Douglas fir trees because it's too windy today. As soon as it went above the Douglas fir, it got blown away and I've just spent an hour looking for it. The story of how it got here isn't really known by the wider public, but it does make me wonder when I see trees with certain names, how they got those names. And then when you look into it, you kind of go on a journey of pure wonder and learn a deep respect for the people of old. What people did to get the information we have today, to have things named after them. Because people today don't really have a respect for how much we take for granted. All these things that have been discovered for us, the amount of depth, the amount of ambition, the amount of work that would have to go into these things. And they're just given names and we think, yeah, that's what it's called, that's what I'll call it. But Archibald Menzies, who was a botanist, got onto a ship, paid for, or his journey, at least part of his journey, would have been paid for by scientists or horticulturalist societies. A little bit like where we have Elon Musk has ships going up to space and you have all these different institutes or influences that will pay money to get their research put on board to go up. In the old days where you had the British Empire funding ships that they would then give to captains, these captains would have expeditions or tasks that they would have to do all around the world, and they would take on other crews with different missions. So where Archibald Menzies was on this ship with George Vancouver, Captain George Vancouver, and they set off from the UK. They travelled all around New Zealand. Mapping was the main mission that George Vancouver had. They needed to map these different parts of the world because it would help with trade routes, and the end target was to find a passage through Northern America. But along the strip, George Menzies went with him, and he would find different plants, different trees, different seeds that he'd want to bring back, different species that he would want to bring back on this ship. But bearing in mind, there was much competition, if not war, between the British and the French and the Spanish, so they would have to worry about things like this on their expedition. They would have only a certain amount of food, a certain amount of time they could be out there, so they would have to bargain for food. So the captain would have to decide what was more important on these journeys, whether they could stop off in all these places, whether they'd done their mapping, whether they could stay for longer, what the weather was like. They didn't have the same technology that we have today. Even the way they drew maps back then, they would draw it by hand using tools where they would work out sums and calculations on how they would put it to scale, and then when they would bring it back, all their journals would go to other professionals that would fill in these maps that other captains would use. And it is a huge undertaking that doesn't get the respect today, because again, we just take things for granted. We turn on our phone, want to get somewhere, put Google Maps on, the job's done. So this epic tale began back in 1700s, around 1791, where King George III dispatched Captain George Vancouver on the HMS Discovery on a 4-year expedition. And his goal was to map the elusive Northwest Passage. Come on, Coco. Come on, you can do it. Come on, boy. Good boy. After rounding Cape Horn and crossing the vast Pacific, they finally sighted the west coast of North America in April 1792. They would survey the land, send little boats out, they would use these little tools called sextants or something. I've looked into how they even use this tool. I ain't got a clue. But it was through using timing and pacing out distances, as they would have sailors that were on land walking along, and then they would have experts back on the ship that would be calculating these distances and drawing things up by freehand. But everywhere they went, they encountered First Nations people, and they had thrived in these areas for millennia. They were experts in these areas. The journals of both Vancouver and Menzies are pretty rich with the descriptions of these communities and their intricate social structures. Because Vancouver, Captain Vancouver, where he would be under the command of many different captains to get up to the stage where he could have his own ship command, he'd learnt how to communicate with a lot of these First Nations. These tribes were all at war with one another. Well, not all of them, but there were many disputes going on between the First Nations, so you'd have to know how to deal with the different tribes. So it was treacherous, to say the least. But Menzies, in one of his journals, showed his just absolute astonishment at these forests, writing about the trees' extraordinary magnitude. I mean, in here we've got cedar trees, as well as we have some more Douglas trees in here, fir Douglas trees, which were brought over here. They're not native here. So when someone like Archibald Menzies first saw these trees, especially in America where they were untouched, they would have been massive. They would have been completely different to the trees that they were used to. So, you know, the awe. I mean, you've got some of these trees in Japan, in China, and Thailand. They're slightly different because they've had to deal with different climates. But these trees, the evolution of trees, dealing with ice ages, dealing with so much over the planet where many would die off and then manage to grow back over time when the climate was constantly shifting. And we even see that now. With relentless climate change that's happened since the beginning of the planet, not only animals, but the plant life has to evolve to cope with this different changing climate. Because as it shifts over millions of years, the trees become established to a certain type of soil, to a certain type of heat, to a certain type of season change. And as that climate changes, trees die off or adapt. Pseudotsuga means false hemlock because it's not a fir, nor is it a hemlock. It's its own type of tree. But so Menzies then managed to get lots of different species of plants that he was commissioned to bring back to England, because that's what would happen back then. The British Empire would like to collate all this information from around the world, maybe just to show off the exuberance of the British Empire, but also to document, because the British Empire was all over the world. It wasn't just creating bad stuff around the world. All civilizations have done that, but it was also creating a lot of good, documenting, making sure that these things were known about, studied, so that we didn't destroy things that were important, so that we would always have a record of these things. But on the way back, there was tragedy. For all these years that Menzies was documenting and collecting all these different species diligently, bringing them back onto the ship, I think he had like this weird glass container that a lot of the seeds that he'd originally picked up at the beginning of the journey were starting to sprout. And he was adamant that we had to take care of these things. It was vital that we got them back safely. But at the same time, Captain Vancouver was dealing with illness from being out so long, possible injuries. There was a lot that they were dealing with on those journeys. Like in the winters, they would go and stay in Hawaii, but the people, the natives of Hawaii, weren't exactly friendly. So there was so much going on in that time, where you had Menzies only cared about the species of plants he was finding. Captain Vancouver had to worry about getting the ship back to the Empire, completing his mission, not being reprimanded for going against his orders from the Crown or from royalty back in England. So maybe, and this is my theory, he decided to leave at the wrong time when they knew there would be storms on the high seas, because as they tried to come back from their expedition. There was a huge storm. This huge storm, possibly through some incompetence of people on board that were supposed to protect these species, the ship got flooded and many of these species were lost. Menzies was furious, absolutely furious. All his work was destroyed and he was so angry, Captain Vancouver had to imprison him on board. And they fell out, all that work together, and they fell out. They weren't best of friends. So now the story of the Douglas fir went dormant for at least 30 years. And it wasn't until 1823 that the Horticultural Society of London dispatched another botanist, this time David Douglas. And he was there to scour North America for new plant species. So Davis Douglas, he went out, and this was the first time Douglas successfully sent seeds back to Britain. The tree was ultimately named Pseudotsuga menziesii in honor of Archibald Menzies, the original discoverer, but it famously became known as the Douglas fir after the man who brought it to show to the rest of the world. Even David Douglas, 10 years old, he was fascinated by different trees, different plants, and it was around 20 years old when he was taken on to work with the Horticultural Society of London, which then became the Royal Horticultural Society. And they commissioned him, and he managed to get onto another British ship, and then he was sent out to go and do the great work. So when you're walking in the forest and you see certain trees around that shouldn't be here, you do have to wonder, how did they get here? What is the history of these plants? There's so many different plants. Even when you walk in your local park, there are hybrids, trees that have been stitched together to develop almost a new breed of tree. Not quite, but the history of these things, because some trees can live up to like 5,000 years old. So they would have been here through the history of humanity. The paths you're walking on, the trees you're touching, could have touched the hands of so many great people. They've lived through eras where millions of people have died, and they'll be here long after us. And that does make trees absolutely beautiful to me. The wonder of what they'll see next when we're no longer here. Hope that wasn't too boring. I'm going to finish my hike, and I hope you have a lovely day.